Databasics. I thought that was really clever. I came up with that late last night, so maybe it's not that clever. Database, right? Facebook marketing, Google AdWords, buying leads, cold calls. It's all about building the database if you don't have a database, or working the database if you do. So as I've said, my 3 non-negotiables, right? Energy management, the database, and tracking. These are 3 things that are crucial to your success long-term and short-term. They don't feel like you're winning in the short term when you start putting all these things in place, but as things scale up, man, they scale up so much more smoothly. So I like Seth Godin's quote when it comes to marketing, right? Marketing is what others are saying about you. So what are people out there saying about you? And I think this was another great quote. And by the way, this is an airplane doodle. That was one of the things I would do. Sometimes on the inside cover of a journal, I'd have a couple of colored pens, and a great quote would stick with me: cultivate your constituency, right? Like you see people talk about ignore the haters. I don't like that phrase because I don't think anybody hates me, and I don't hate anybody. Like that's just a weird concept to me. Who's got the energy to put into that? I don't get it. And I try and stay away from negative things whenever possible. You know, when I was teaching our kids to ride a bike, I never yelled, "Don't fall." I always yelled, "Maintain your balance." Okay, maybe not always, but that's what I tried to always say, right? Focus on the positive. So this is a way, I guess, of saying that other thing that I don't want to repeat, but I think it's a much better way to say it, and it's a great thought to have in your head. Cultivate your constituency. Who are your people? Who's got your back? Who's supporting you? Who wants to help you build that business? Cultivate those relationships. Work on those people who are your constituency, right? And define your market, right? AAA income, stellar income, huge down payment. AAA credit, pardon me, stellar income, huge down payment. That's my kind of client. I defined my client. I knew who I wanted to meet, right? And then you know where to go to meet them once you figure out who you want to meet. But building a database, it's a slow grind. It takes time. It pays off eventually, but it is, well, look at this event. Look at this event. I've had a blog going out for 5 years. There's almost 4,000 people on that blog. I've never really put an ask out on that blog at all. 5 years, cultivating the constituency, trying to give something out there of value. So, sometimes it's a really slow build, but when it builds and gets going, it really can get going. And what's the number one way we change? We change and we learn to do a new thing through constant spaced repetition. Constant spaced repetition is the best way to change, the best way to change your habits. The other way is impact. Boom, you're forced to change. You have a heart attack and you realize, okay, I got to ease up on the cigars, whiskey, and steaks, charcoal, blackened steaks. I got to ease up on that. This is a bad idea. Bang, impact, right? That's how most of us wind up changing, unfortunately. And we fail to change through that constant spaced repetition the same way. But I like my cigars, and now they put a stent in, and I'm feeling good again, and I'll be fine. Give me another steak, and I'll have a whiskey. And that's why 90% of people who suffer a major heart attack suffer another one inside 10 years because they fail to change, right? I remember reading that. The book's titled Change or Die. My own father actually had open heart surgery a few years ago, and as his eyes fluttered open and he came to and realized he was still alive, I handed him the book, Change or Die. Welcome back, Dad. Okay, I'm exaggerating a little bit. And he didn't have a lot of habits he needed to change. Heck, the guy had his heart attack out on his daily 7-mile walk. That's just not fair. How's that for irony for you, right? It's kind of ridiculous. But in the book, it talks about how 90% of people just don't change. And it's because of that constant spaced repetition of doing the same things for years. It's hard. The impact didn't quite pull them away. How did the 10% change? That's what gave me hope in doing things like this with people like you. How did the 10% of people change who wanted to change? First off, they really wanted to change. They spent time with other people who also wanted to change. That's how, right? And The old guy, he's still out going for his walks on a regular basis and everything is good. And I don't think he had too many bad habits to begin with, so that one was just bad luck. Building a database, constant spaced repetition, again, it is what it is. But once you build these habits, they become unbreakable. And we're going to talk about some very specific habits that I want you to build. Number one is going to be contact cards. I mean, myself and contact cards, and we're going to talk a little bit about birthday emails versus mail-out cards and whatnot. Once you get these habits ingrained, they're pure gold. And your network is your net worth. That's really the reality. Your network is your net worth. Network, database, oyster farm, right? This is really what you got. When you think about it, you want calls coming in from your oyster farm. Now, is every oyster going to have a pearl in it? Nope, it's not. I mean, 4 calls are going to come in. 2 of them, you're not going to be able to do a thing with. No pearl there. 2 of them, the other 2, you're going to be like, I think I see a pearl there. And in one case, you're going to be right. Every 4 calls turns into 1 funded file. That is the math. Consistently, over and over in conversations with brokers back and forth across the country. If you've got a solid database, a good referral network, every 4th call is a funding file, more or less. So answering calls as they come in, it's like shucking oysters, right? 4, 2, 1. That's the formula to keep in mind. Now, if your phone's not ringing, then you best be making other people's phone ring. I mean, that's the reality. There's no way around it. You need to be on the phone, either because you've answered a call or because you're making a call. And yes, I'm only going to say it once in the whole 2 days, right? I actually should have brought the quote up. I came across it last night. So 3 or 4 years ago, delivered the workshop, and I got the feedback, and the feedback was, basically, Dustin just told us to make 10 calls a day. Lame. That's what the guy got out of 2 full days. 12 hours of content. That was his only takeaway. Here's the thing. If he made those 10 calls a day, he would close 25 million in volume a year, without question. Now, I'm not the kind of person who keeps track of who said what about me when or whatever, and I don't ever look at who unsubscribes from things. I never pay attention to any of that. It's not healthy, right? It's like if Facebook had a dislike button, you wouldn't want to know who was disliking your post. That's not cool. So I don't really know who it was, but I figure they've either exited the business or they started making some calls and they have actually had some success. But I thought that was a really, really interesting quote. But I'm going to tell you the one time. If you're newer to this business, if you're having a little bit flatter a year than you'd like to have, you make 10 outbound calls, warm calls into your database, and everyone has a database. Everyone has some kind of database. And they don't have to be 10, hey, do you need a mortgage calls at all. They just need to be 10 outbound calls. Just interact with people. It's more important today than ever to make those 10 outbound calls. It absolutely is. There's no question. Because you're not out in the world bumping into people. And when you bump into them, it's like, oh, no, am I going to die? I mean, you don't want to bump into anyone physically. So you're keeping your distance, and you got a mask on, and you can't read their face, and it's awkward to have a technical conversation. So these calls matter more than ever at this point. So like I say, the 10 calls a day can make the difference. Step number 1, when it comes to your database, you gotta be a little bit obsessive, all right? You don't wanna be like this person, right? I'm here for you. Thanks. I'm going through a tough time, so it means a lot. And sorry, I lost all my contacts. Who is this? This is your Uber driver. I'm here to pick you up, right? It's pretty easy to misunderstand if you don't know who you're actually communicating with. And that's the root of why you want to save every single contact card of anyone who ever phones you, emails you, texts you, anything, wrong numbers included. I got a guy who's misdialed me half a dozen times. He's a builder. We had that big of a conversation. He's got a mortgage guy. And of course, now I'm kind of out of the game on the day-to-day basis. But he misdialed me again about a year ago. And I'd almost want to like just get back in and do that one mortgage, because that would be pure gold after 9 years of this guy misdialing me.